Welcome to the Central Bureau for things that could have gone differently. You will now be given 6 choices. For the Department of Redistributed Fate, press 1. For the Department of Misplaced Moments, press 2. For the Archive of Forgotten Promises, press 3. For the Office of Alternate Decisions, press 4. For the Lost Argument Recycling Center, press 5. For the Department of Missed Opportunities you never even knew about, press 6. You have to press something, dearie. We have to make choices in life, or nothing will ever happen. Welcome to the Lost Argument Recycling Center. We tell you what you should have said. For arguments lost within the last 24 hours, press 1. For arguments lost within the last week, press 2. For arguments lost within the last 12 months, press 3. For arguments lost more than 12 months ago, press 4. For more information about the Lost Argument Recycling Center, press 6. You have chosen option number 6. More information about the Lost Argument Recycling Center. The Lost Argument Recycling Center is part of the Central Bureau for things that could have gone differently. The Bureau's overarching mission is to catalogue and redistribute regrets, grudges, hesitations and misunderstandings. The Lost Argument Recycling Center specifically collect what was almost said, what was said incorrectly, and what arrived too late to be useful. Through careful sorting and redistribution, we aim to better understand the patterns of hesitation and miscommunication, and quietly log what defines human interaction. Each recovered argument offers insight into how people try, and often fail, to be understood, and how meaning often shifts in the space between intention and expression. When someone loses an argument, or thinks of the perfect comeback too late, the unused arguments or comebacks are collected, processed, and reassigned. The Lost Argument Recycling Center cannot help you win arguments in the future, but sometimes the center can bring you some peace in knowing that your argument has successfully been used by someone else. As the Bureau works through the threads of the collective unconscious, we prefer most of our callers to reach us by accident, and not by conscious choice. The Bureau and each of its departments and offices can only be reached by using an unconnected, old-fashioned push phone or rotary phone. Most callers are people who are cleaning out an elder relative's estate, browsing an antique store, or sheltering from the rain in an old phone booth that should have been turned into a little free library, but has thus far been overlooked. For a caller to be able to reach us on such a phone, there also has to exist a paradoxical connect/disconnect. You have to have lost something, like an argument, but still not be able to let it go. A pensive or contemplative mood will increase your chances of reaching us. So does deep feelings of being misplaced, overlooked, or could have been. The Lost Argument Recycling Center can assist callers in revealing what they should have said in specific scenarios from the recent or distant past, and follow the psychic link that linger between memory and the present moment, to trace where the argument was distributed to and whether it worked for the receiver. You will now be returned to the previous menu. For arguments lost within the last 24 hours, press 1. For arguments lost within the last week, press 2. For arguments lost within the last 12 months, press 3. For arguments lost more than 12 months ago, press 4. You have chosen option 1, arguments lost within the last 24 hours. 1 argument available, catalogued as the kitchen argument. To review the kitchen argument, press 1. To return to the previous menu, press 2. The kitchen argument happened on a rainy Tuesday evening. It wasn't really about the dishes, and you both knew that, but the underlying issues were much larger, and you worried that the crux of it was that you were not that compatible. The light above the sink flickered and sent the room into shadow for a few seconds, then came back on again. Dishes clanked against each other. Water ran longer than it needed to. They said, "You always do this," and you said, "That's not fair," which was true, but also inaccurate. A standard response, expressing only disagreement, not an argument at all. Being wasteful, that was their argument, and you said nothing after that, because the sunk cost fallacy applies to relationships too sometimes. This one had probably lasted longer than it should, but you still didn't want it to end. A plate slipped once, was caught mid-fall, and return to the stack as if nothing had happened. You turn off the flickering under-cabinet light when the dishes are done, and the kitchen fades into a dim, cozy fuzziness. The blue light from outside, the rain, the warmer yellow of the ceiling light, and the anger inside you remains. You're probably overreacting again. This has happened many times before. Three days later, you think of the perfect comeback in the shower. Maybe it's the running water. It sounds a bit like a heavy rainfall. You close your eyes and imagine standing under a small, warm waterfall on a tropical island somewhere, all alone. You imagine it as detailed as you can. The wind in the trees around you, the birdsong. The argument slips, goes down the drain with everything else, and by the time you step out of the shower, it is gone from your mind, like a dream, fading upon waking. This is not an unusual happening. Late comebacks are collected in bathrooms and showers worldwide. They go down the drain and end up with us. Our clerks are busiest between 6:30 and 7:30 a.m. while people are shampooing. And since it is always between 6:30 and 7:30 a.m. somewhere, we are always busy. Redistribution record. Your comeback was issued at 8:14 a.m. this morning to a man standing in his driveway in Ontario, Canada, halfway through an argument he didn't expect to have before work. His car idled with the door open, engine humming. He was impatient, running late. His neighbor insisted he wait. They were arguing about time, being late, being inconsiderate. Something said too quickly earlier, but the conversation skips forward quickly, as if it has already happened, and neither of them feels the need to explain it all again. The man holds his keys without using them. He also holds himself back from leaving, but he is impatient. He should have left already. The line enters suddenly into his mind, and he grabs hold of it instantly. He stumbles through it, reshaping it as he goes. I don't always do this. You give me no leeway. He said it awkwardly, but the argument still lands. The morning rearranges itself around it. Pressure resides. The conversation settles like dust on the floor. You will now be returned to the previous menu. For arguments lost within the last 24 hours, press 1. For arguments lost within the last week, press 2. For arguments lost within the last 12 months, press 3. For arguments lost more than 12 months ago, press 4. For more information about the Lost Argument Recycling Center, press 5. You chose option 2, Arguments lost within the last week. There are no entries. You spent the last week mostly alone. You had no arguments, not even with yourself. It was a good week. You will now be returned to the previous menu. For arguments lost within the last 24 hours, press 1. For arguments lost within the last week, press 2. For arguments lost within the last 12 months, press 3. For arguments lost more than 12 months ago, press 4. For more information about the Lost Argument Recycling Center, press 5. You chose option number 3, Arguments lost within the last 12 months. 57 lost arguments logged. For simplicity, they have been divided into subcategories. For sarcastic retorts never used, press 1. For devastating one-liners you would have instantly regretted, press 2. For quietly crushing observations that took too long to put into words, press 3. For points you only realized later, press 4. For arguments that occurred entirely in your imagination, press 5. For all the times you were ignored or talked over, press 6. To return to the previous menu, press 7. You chose option number 3, quietly crushing observations that took too long to put into words. This category contains 5 entries. Entry 1, the late night message. The argument happened in fragments. The blue light of a screen in a dark room. It was late. You should be asleep. And you hate writing with your thumbs. But there you were, sitting up in bed, typing on your phone. Notifications and speech bubbles kept popping up, angrily, one after the other, and you knew you would regret this later, that you will think of it and not be able to sleep for a long time. You read their latest message 3 times before responding, each time finding a slightly different meaning in it. In the end, you had no idea what they even meant or how to interpret anything. You were tired. You wrote something careful. You deleted it. But then, you see it so clearly. The other person, his annoying faults, his weaknesses, exactly how he misunderstands, exactly how he sees the situation, and it is so typical. You know exactly what you want to say and how to word it to make him understand that his own perspective is thwarted. But it would be very long and would include pointing out their own personality traits, the ones that are holding them back in life, limiting and hurting them. You hesitate. It is past midnight already. And then you type, "You're right. I'm sorry." This option is rarely selected. It feels like losing the argument, but when you press send, you can let it go, and then you set your phone to do not disturb, place it on the nightstand, and watch as the blue light fades away. You relax. Tension fades. You soak in the silence of your bedroom, the distant sounds from outside. Your bed is comfortable and warm. The air you breathe is cool. The quiet of the night lulls you to sleep. It is many, many hours until anyone will demand anything of you. Redistribution record. The extended argument you threw away was forwarded to a teenager sitting on a train on a sunny afternoon, phone held too close to her face and anger bubbling in her stomach. Her backpack is on the seat next to her, books spilling out of it. The carriage she's sitting in is almost empty, and a vast, forested valley can be seen through the window. But she is blind to her surroundings, her mind elsewhere. Your long, unused, cruel and honest argument slowly collects itself in her mind. She grasps it greedily, types frantically on her phone. She sends it without editing. She regretted it later. To listen to the next entry in this subcategory, press 1. To return to the previous menu, press 2. You will now be returned to the previous menu. For sarcastic retorts never used, press 1. For devastating one-liners you would have instantly regretted, press 2. For quietly crushing observations that took too long to put into words, press 3. For points you only realized later, press 4. For arguments that occurred entirely in your imagination, press 5. For all the times you were ignored or talked over, press 6. To return to the previous menu, press 7. You chose option number 6. All the times you were ignored or talked over. This subsection contains 32 entries. Reviewing entry 1. The family gathering 3 weeks ago. The room was full of people and over-furnished. There was little room to move around. Leaving, even if only to use the toilet or get some fresh air, seemed to have been made deliberately difficult. It was loud. Voices overlapped. Laughter was frequent. But to you it was just another jarring sound, piercing your tired head. You longed to be alone in a dark, cool, and quiet place, but it would be rude to leave now. The evening stretched out before you, seemingly never-ending. You were by far the youngest in your family. You are the only one present of your generation. The others talked about people you didn't know, places you hadn't been. Some topics revealed a completely different perspective than your own. You disagree. You have different opinions from them, but you don't express yourself. Memories of countless other gatherings, just like this one, holds you back. There's no point. They all see things the same way. You know what you would say, though, but if you said it, they wouldn't accept it anyways. They would laugh at you, talk over you, interrupt you, and act shocked if you did the same to them. It has happened 1,000 times before, until you gave up. After a while, one of them turns towards you and remarks on how quiet you are. All heads turn towards you, and you freeze like a deer in the headlight. I've tried before, you wanted to say, but you shut me down every time. You made me this quiet, and now you remark on it as something weird. But you don't say that either. You just shrug and mumble something about not knowing the person they were talking about. And soon enough, they're chatting away again, like they have forgotten that you're even there. The evening drags on, but it will end, and you have a different life elsewhere. Redistribution record. 2 of the unused arguments from this family gathering was later assigned to a public radio call-in segment. The caller's voice shook slightly. He stuttered and stammered and restarted sentences, but the host let him finish. Afterwards, there was relief and acceptance, and there were no interruptions, because the host had also experienced something similar. Many people have, in fact, even though each of them feels very alone when it happens. Now, they look for each other. They find each other. The host points this out. That's why the radio show exists. A show about the inner child and how to heal them. Times are changing. The caller and the host both feel hopeful. If you would like to listen to the next entry, press 1. To return to the previous menu, press 2. You will now be returned to the previous menu. For sarcastic retorts never used, press 1. For devastating one-liners you would have instantly regretted, press 2. For quietly crushing observations that took too long to put into words, press 3. For points you only realized later, press 4. For arguments that occurred entirely in your imagination, press 5. For all the times you were ignored or talked over, press 6. To return to the previous menu, press 7. You chose option 7. You will now be returned to the previous menu. For arguments lost within the last 24 hours, press 1. For arguments lost within the last week, press 2. For arguments lost within the last 12 months, press 3. For arguments lost more than 12 months ago, press 4. For more information about the Lost Document Recycling Center, press 5. You chose option 4. Arguments lost more than 12 months ago. You currently have 4,382 unresolved or lost documents in this time frame. Due to the natural degeneration and manipulation of memories over time, these arguments cannot easily be subcategorized. If you would like random and meandering samples, press 1. If you would like to return to the previous menu, press 2. You chose option 1. At this point, we could tell you what you should have said to your high school teacher or to the bully that bothered you that one summer before thankfully moving away. Technically, the one moment your father was proud of you would also be logged here. Unfortunately, these sort of things tend to degrade over time and eventually be moved to the category clerical error and no longer be available to you. To retrieve it, you must have a correctly filled out form L17, proof of emotional ownership, and no one around here has seen that form in over a decade. What you do remember is this. You're 8 years old, and it's a lazy summer. You're laying on the grass under a tree with your elderly dog next to you. You're reading a book. The dog is napping. You're just hanging out together, and you have all the time in the world. You're arguing with your best friend after you both scrubbed your knees, and later that day, just as the sun sets, you are running over to their house just down the street to apologize. They said the whole thing is stupid, and then you watched cartoons. You remember learning to row a boat on a small lake with your uncle teaching you. You remember putting your back into it, straining your muscles. The sound of the oars against the oarlog and the water dripping off. Connection to Kola is weakening. Their mind is at ease for now. You do not need us anymore. Perhaps, if you are still listening, it is time to let go.